Tim Linder here. Let's take a look at some of the tools in Photoshop. Now, let's not take a deep look into some of these tools, but let's take a kind of a whirlwind, very quick overview of our tools panel. So over here on the left side are all my tools that I can use inside of Photoshop. And if I want to adjust those tools or what's in the tool panel, I can click on this little ellipse down here. I rarely ever do this, maybe never, but if I look in here, I can see, oh, these are all the tools, and it shows me what the quick key, hotkey is to get to those tools. And you'll also see some of them are in kind of chunked or boxes. So I get a rectangular marquee, elliptical, single row, single column, but that's all in this little spot right here, all four of these tools. So you see they're kind of chunked together there, and I could look at all of them here or remove some of them, or I could restore them back to their basics or defaults if I wanted to. But notice if I click and hold rectangular, elliptical, single row marquee. So some of these tools have other similar tools that are underneath them. They also have, by default, if you don't turn it off in the preferences and I hold my mouse over them, a little video that shows you what that tool is going to do. And that shows you what the hotkey is as well. So in the marquee tool, if I were to click and drag, it's going to make a selection of what I've got there in a rectangular marquee. Now, you can also see it shows it in these little dotted lines or marching ants, which is what they call it, also a Dave Matthews song. And if you were to click on another selection tool down here, I can make selections in other ways, a freeform selection. Or if I click and hold, let's say a polygonal selection. So I'm clicking, I can hit return or start where I ended and make a polygonal selection. So different ways of making selections with these top two tools. The move tool will allow me to move what's in a selection if I wanted to. I'm gonna hit Command Z or edit undo, and go back to my very beginning. Now, I can also hit Command D to deselect, or select deselect if I want to deselect a selection that I've got. So these are some of the selection tools that are free form or specific shapes. Now, I can also choose some options that are like, oh, let's see if it can select a subject. You'll also notice right here under select subject, it also is down here at the bottom. This is the contextual menu. I normally don't have this on, but I'll show you what, basically it's just a collection of things that Photoshop thinks that you might like to do with after looking at an image or whatever tool you've got. It's going to put other things within context of what you're doing down here in this bar. They can also be found any other places inside of Photoshop. So I'm kind of old school. I don't use that contextual bar, but if you wanted to have it on, that's what's going to show there. And it's just going to not randomly, it's going to hopefully intelligently change depending on what you're doing in Photoshop to give you easy and quick access to tools that might make sense to what you're doing. So if I go up here, choose this tool, notice also that as I choose these different tools, the options bar up here changes. So depending on what tool you have, the options for that tool shows up here at the top. So if I've got this object selection tool, I can say, oh, let's select the subject. And you can also, as we go into this, do different things like, okay, this is going to select the subject using the processor on my laptop right now. This version will take longer because it's going to upload this whole image to the Adobe servers and put their complete server power into figuring out this image and all their AI tools and everything else to try to figure out what is the subject. So this may take a lot longer or a little bit longer depending on how quick your network is and things like that, but it's going to throw everything Adobe servers at it in order to make the selection rather than just your device. So if I click select subject, it's going to look through and it looks like I've got this guy and I could make a selection. I'm going to hit deselect and see what happens if I do try the cloud version, see how long that takes. Select subject, taking a little bit. It's upload my image. Adobe's got it. There it goes. And boy, a little bit better. It didn't choose the bird and things like that, a little bit closer, but still got a little bit of the ladder and things like that. So anyway, that is some of the selection tools. I've got a crop tool where I could crop into that selection, right? So I can crop my image or adjust that crop or rotate my crop if I wanted to. I'm going to undo all that, get out of my crop tool here. Undo on my crop tool. Now, one of my favorite tools, the one that I'm using a lot, are the two down here at the bottom. And, well, actually this one, the hand tool, not necessarily the rotate tool. The rotate tool will rotate my view. It's not going to print 45 degrees. It's only rotating how I want to look at it here on my screen. So if I print, this is going to print right side up. If I double click, it'll go back to right side up. But really, the tool that I mentioned to you was the hand tool. That moves around my image, which is my viewable area. Same thing as grabbing these little slide bars and moving it up and down. So if I'm zoomed in, scrubby zoom, click on the eyeball of the bird, zooms into that area, and then I use my hand tool, I'm going to move around. The quick key combination, the hotkey for the hand tool is the space bar, the biggest key. I'm always using this tool. So if I've got any other tool, whether it's the marquee tool or the zoom tool, and I click and hold on the space bar, I get to move the hand tool so I could move around, so I could be painting while I'm zoomed in and just kind of move around. And as I let go of the space bar, it just jumps back to whatever tool I've got. That way, if I'm painting on something or adjusting color, I can just hold space bar down while I'm moving around in on it while I'm still zoomed in, and then jump back to the tool that I was using before. That goes for any of these tools. Clicking once on the hotkey jumps to it. Clicking and holding is temporarily on that tool until you let up on the key. So right now I've got the marquee tool, and if I just tap on the B key, I go to the brush tool, right? And I'm permanently at the brush tool. I can paint with my brush tool. Undo, Command Z. If I were to click it, if I'm on the marquee tool and I click and hold on the brush key and I don't let up on the B key, it goes to my brush tool, and as soon as I let go of my brush on my B key, it jumps back to the marquee tool. Command Z, undo that again. So sticky keys. Click and hold on a quick hotkey temporarily to that tool. Click once and let go, it permanently jumps to that tool. So there we go. So we looked at we started at the top and then jumped down to the bottom, or middle of the bottom, a little bit up into the bottom. But let's take a look at some of these other options here. I've got different ways of viewing my image. Standard screen mode or full screen mode if I wanted to jump to full screen, right? So I can view my image in different ways. This is a different way of looking at selections. So where we're used to looking at marching ants or the little dotted line as a selection, I could click here and look at it as that selection as kind of a red mask if I wanted to jump back and forth. I'd probably steer away from using that as a beginner right off the gate. Wait till we get done with one of the more complex selection videos before you get into that. My foreground and background color can be changed right here. If I want to grab a red as my foreground color and use that with my brush tool, I can. Command Z, undo that. Foreground and background color. This gets me back to defaults. Default pure black and white as my background color. I can swap those. Same thing if I hit the D key, I've got red. Go to default colors, hit the D key, goes back. Same thing, right? So some of these tools, these four, deal with vector-based shapes. We'll talk about that a lot later, but basically I can create a shape layer. So if I grab the ellipse tool and I click and drag, I've got a shape layer, a specific shape layer. Notice here over on the left side, I've got a shape layer, right? And I've got tools to modify those shape layers too. So if I get my shape and then I get my direct selection tool, I can grab a specific point and adjust that shape if I wanted to. Okay, so that's that tool. I can create, if you're used to using Illustrator, I can create my own shapes with my pen tool, create a shape layer that way. Okay. I've got other traditional photo editing tools that you might harken from traditional photo editing and wet, lab development tools and things like that. So let's say I grab my Dodge tool and I want to brighten an image in a specific area, I could do that. Or if I wanted to go down and get my Burn tool and I wanted to darken an image in a certain area, so I want to darken that up, I can click on my Burn tool. I can get a gradient if I wanted to click and drag and grab a gradient. I'm going to delete my gradient tool there. I can erase back to whatever the background color is if I wanted to. So I can also grab my clone stamp tool. These are more kind of photo editing tools for retouching and things like that. Maybe I don't like that ladder popped up there. I can hold Option and click on this portion of the wall and make kind of a clone of that portion of the wall down here and start to get rid of that little ladder if I wanted to. I can also click on some of these other editing tools like my spot healing brush. Let's say, you know what, I don't like that big dot right here on the wall. Let's click on that and start to get rid of it, and I can paint that out. Sometimes I'm having trouble though because it might pick up some other things if I wanted to, or I don't like the bill on his hat sticking out. I could paint over that with the spot healing brush tool and eliminate it altogether. So I could do that with the cloning tool or the spot healing or the remove tool. We'll talk a lot about these editing tools a little bit later. I can grab my eyedropper tool and pick up a specific color. I want the orange there so that when I grab some type and add some type, it's going to be in that orange color. Let me get rid of my type layer here. I think I showed crop earlier, right? I can crop a specific area of my image. Maybe I just want this guy's head in my crop, or rotate if I wanted to. I can crop my image in that way, right? So these are just a brief overview of all the tools inside of Photoshop, and we'll talk a lot more in depth with each of these in later videos.